everyone. Today I have with me best-selling author Amy Gary. And Amy, I'm here to talk to Amy today about this book. She has written other books, but this is her most current book. It just came out in January, and it's called In the Great Green Room. And it's the story of Margaret Wise Brown. And when I saw this, I think I saw it on Goodreads. I was like, okay, I have 6 children. I want you to imagine in your brain how many times I've read Goodnight Moon. Okay.
Oh, no, and we actually called it an editable book because the kids would gnaw on them, and you'd have to go buy another one.
I'd love to know how many I bought in there, because there's an age difference between my 6 children and my daughter, my oldest daughter. When I told her that I was interviewing her, she went through she did the whole thing. By heart, because she now has 2 little boys, and she was like,
yes,
and I'm like, it's one of those books that just flows from your tongue, and I don't know, because I've read lots of children's books, I have, and I enjoy lots of them, but there is something about that book. And so when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I have to read this because I knew nothing about her. And there is something about why are my toddlers saying, read me this book, read me every night. I want to read this. They'll like other books, but it's like, read me this book and then we'll read other books.
But I do think it's more than the words. I think it's also, she really tried to get children to interact with the story. And the mouse is an interaction because she felt that you could keep their attention through sound interactions or through the repetition. She believed that children loved to play with words, that was something that was innate in every child, every generation, every, race, nationality, doesn't matter, that they love to play with words. And this gave them a way to play with words and a way to interact with the illustrations and to interact with their parents because their parents love it too. So yes. I think that's the formula for a great, successful, long-lasting children's book.
I know, and my children used to, especially my younger sons, they started adding in. They would look around their room and start adding in things, and then they used to make things up that the woman that says hush, they used to make things up that she said. Yeah, it is very interactive. And when I read your book, I was realizing I didn't even pick up on the fact that certain things were highlighted, like the art. And I read that a million times. I'm like, I wish I had one. I don't have one anymore.
Until I read that, I didn't either. And I was very familiar with how Sendak had drawn you into the story and illustrations in the room the illustrations kept getting bigger and bigger as he left his room and went to the island, and then they retreated. But I wasn't at all familiar with how she had said subtly, shade these different things. And brilliance on her part again.
Yeah. Really?
She gave far more. Nowadays, they really try to keep writers and illustrators separate. But because they were at the forefront of creating picture books as we know them, and so she interacted with her illustrators very heavily and gave a lot of instructions that nowadays really people would not take. They would want to do their own thing. So
yeah, I did, and I love that part of the story was that she was breaking ground. With the golden books and all, I was a child of the 60s, so the things that were that was in my era coming out, like she was at the beginning of that, and I loved how she kind of came into her. She wanted to be this author. She wanted to be this literary giant, and then children's books kind of found her, and then she kind of ran with it, and
and tried to escape a couple of times and write some things that were for adults. But really, this was her gift, and it was so nice to read through her letters and her diaries, where she really did finally just say, what, I am what I am. This is children's books is where it's at for me, and I'm going to make my money this way. And the other thing is, she did try to write songs for adults towards the end of her life because she really loved music and wanted to write what her friends called jukebox songs. But really, for the most part, she said, what, I'm very good at what I do. Finally, she came to grips with it.
Well, I have to ask you, because whenever I have an author like you that's really been, like, you got to read her stuff, you got to like experience her, like, did you feel that calling to like tell her story? Like when you found, it must have been such a huge undertaking to like, I know this doesn't, this book is packed, okay? For people who don't know it, this book is packed. And the detail that you got, you were like literally in her brain you know,
Yes.
writing, it's not just about like, oh, in 19 this, she did this. And then, no, you were like in her brain, like, you know, experiencing what she was experiencing.
So what happened was I did write the standard biography first, and turn that into my publisher, because I actually, when you send off chapters to a publisher to have them approved, I had written the prologue in that particular style where you're in Margaret's brain and you're following her, because I found what she called a vignette, which was a little, she actually, I don't want to say she started writing a memoir of her own at some point, and so I had some of those available, and I was able to pull from those. But I read her diary of that particular day, and I found a letter where she was writing to somebody about having gone out for this particular rabbit hunt. And then I also found the log books of the Beagle Club that she belonged to. So I was able to take all those pieces and really be in that moment with her. And I kind of hoped that when I turned in the prologue and then the first 3 chapters or so, that the publisher would say, wow, I really like how you wrote that prologue in that very intimate style. And it is very, it feels like fiction almost, narrative nonfiction is what it's called. But,
yes.
But I hope that he would say, why don't you write the whole thing that way? And he didn't. So I went ahead and finished the whole biography the standard way. And actually, he hired a new editor who did come back and say, I really like how you wrote the prologue. Could you go back and redo the whole thing in that style? And it actually is very challenging, because you had to, I actually used a lot of fiction-style techniques where you look at her internal conflict and her external conflict. You look at like what was driving her at that moment. What was the resolution? What was the crisis? What was the resolution? To make it every scene, because everybody has those stories in their lives, and what was she thinking on this particular day? How was she seeing the world? And it is actually much harder to write that way. It's great to have everything sort of laid out with as many diaries and letters and manuscripts even, because you could see her life through her manuscripts as well. But to take all of those and put them into an actual biography was very challenging. And then you had to go and add all the other details of the day. But it was, and I had wonderful interviews with her sister. I spent a lot of time with her sister and one of her friends, and a couple of her friends actually. And they told such great stories about her. So I was able to incorporate all of that. But it's very difficult to write it in that style, believe it or not. It sounds simple when you read it. It feels simple, but it's actually far harder.
I really got that from it. I can only imagine. And I was thinking, whenever I read a book like this about people that lived, prior, it's like, thank God they kept what they kept.
And she had so many diaries. She kept diaries her whole life. She was never without a journal she was writing in. Thank goodness, because you could just pull everything from it. But then, of course, that creates a lot of material that you have to condense down into 70,000 words. So that was the challenge.
I know, and it's like, did she know that she was going to be, like, she didn't know. She didn't know that she was going to be the woman that that my grandchildren are still reading her books. Like, she had no idea that was going to be her legacy. But I mean, it wasn't like she was writing diaries going, okay, so in 50 years when,
But she did do it so that she could remind herself of the day. And because she liked to go back, and she did go back and mine her childhood diaries and her college day diaries. I can actually tell you what book that came from those particular moments that she went back and read her diary and said, oh, I remember doing this. I'm going to write about that. So she did. She used them later on, but certainly had no idea when she was writing at the time that was how it was going to be. So.
Well, what's interesting is when I started it, as when I start any kind of biography or autobiography, right away I look for that rags to riches story. And with her, it's not a rags to riches story. I'm reading this going, wait a second, she wasn't, she's talking about things that she did during the Depression. This woman was not a rags to riches.
No.
And in that time
she never suffered, let's say.
Not unless her dad tried to make her suffer for go get a job. But I mean, other than that, he was paying. Did any of it shock you when you started this? Did anything shock you about her that you weren't ready to know?
I think that one of the hardest things for me to come to grips with was not the fact she had relationships with both men and women, and one woman in particular who was John Barrymore's former wife, who went by her stage name, Michael Strange, was born Blanche Ulrichs. And it wasn't difficulty of that relationship that gave me trouble as far as it being,
right.
a lesbian relationship. What gave me difficulty was Margaret was so smart and strong-headed. Why did she let this person denigrate her at a dinner table or out in public with other friends? I mean, it was, and she demeaned what Margaret did for a living initially. You've got to stop writing those fairy tales or furry stories and write something serious. So she really sort of prodded Margaret in a way that was that I found disturbing, because it bothered me that she was in that relationship, and she was also in a relationship that hurt her initially. Mm-hmm. And she'd also had another relationship where the man went and married somebody else while they were in a very heated part of their relationship, thinking that they could continue on. And so why she put up with that was difficult for me to understand. And unfortunately, I had a friend who's a psychiatrist, and we talked about it, and he helped me be able to see what her motivations were. And it very much boils down to her family. That was how her mother was critical, her father was distant, and so she was recreating that life.
Yeah, because you look at her childhood, and you would say, here's a woman who had a privileged childhood, but if you don't know any different, we're looking at it saying, well, she lived on Long Island and she had this privilege, like she was at boarding school, she had this. Well, she didn't know that. What she knew was that she had this very dysfunctional family, mm-hmm. and it was almost like she was trying to not having a dysfunctional family, she was running right towards people that were going to be dysfunctional for her, mm-hmm.
Exactly. And she entered psychoanalysis to try to help herself get through that. But it took a long time for her to heal herself and to finally step up and have a relationship that was healthy and good, and then unfortunately died right almost as the relationship began.
Right, exactly. And when in your book, you have beautiful picture. I'm so happy that pictures that you showed.
Oh, thank you. The editor did a great job choosing them.
Oh my goodness! Well, even the cover. This is a beautiful book. I'm so glad I have it in hardcover too. But when you showed the picture of the telegram that Michael sent her, Michael Strange. What was she, by the way? She was the same. I wasn't understanding. Was she vaudeville or?
Was she what?
Like a vaudeville entertainer?
Not vaudeville, but she actually wrote a screenplay that was produced. Ethel Barrymore and her husband John starred in. So she was a screenwriter. She wrote poetry. She thought of herself mostly as a writer, but toward the end of her life, she did a lot of radio. Her voice was apparently beautiful, and if you listen to Diana Barrymore, her daughter, speak, I can hear her mother in that. The description of Diana's voice is beautiful and melodious as well. And I think so she would actually go out and perform, read literature or pieces of the Bible to great works of music. And so she was I say performance artist, but it was, she did that in churches and then in certain halls. But it's kind of hard to pin down exactly what she was. So.
Yeah, that's what I was trying, as I was reading it, I was like, wait, what was she, a singer? Like, I didn't understand exactly what, because I knew that she was performing, but I didn't know exactly to what extent. But, okay, mm-hmm. So what I was saying is so she gets the telegram saying, basically, stay away from me. Mm-hmm. Even though they have this place that they're living on at separate ends of a house, right? It's kind of like
an apartment, across the hall from each other, right?
Right, but then she gets sick. Mm-hmm. Or maybe she was sick at that time. I'm not sure. Was she already sick?
Well, they said that she probably had it for 2 years, and I think she was diagnosed finally in 48, 49. So right around the end of that year, beginning of 49. So she was probably sick from 1946 on, because I actually when I was reading through the diaries, noticed Margaret talking about Michael being too tired to do things. You see that as sort of a theme throughout Margaret's diary. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I really saw it even in 43, that you could tell that there were times when her body was failing her. Yeah. But by 46, she was definitely sick, I think.
But then she did get in contact after she got really sick, after mm-hmm. the telegram. Then she got back in touch with her, and Margaret just takes her back, goes all through the sickness with her and helps her and is there when she dies, and
And isn't that interesting? I'm sure you read the part about how the doctor obviously did not like the fact that these women were lesbians, and so was trying to keep them apart and not let Margaret go in and see and be with Michael as she was dying. It was just really cruel when you read through it. It was when you read through Margaret's account of it. Oh. Just heartbreaking, but that was how they were treated.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too, because I can only imagine in that time, like the way that Michael would like disguise herself because it was getting written about, and it was like a big deal because there are these two women that people are like, wait, and I was thinking, how did Bill was the guy that she was also the married guy, right? Like he would even say to her, like he even knew that something was going on between them. And I was like, I wonder what happened that they actually knew it, that these women couldn't pull it off, that there was something else going on,
And I really, so one of the things I did look for is like, did Bill ever really know about their relationship? Did he ever really understand that they had this sort of back and forth? That I could not find where I ever, through the diaries or letters at least, I couldn't see where Bill ever acknowledged that they actually were in a relationship, just the two women together. So I think they kept it fairly hidden. A lot of her friends, her closest friends, did tell me that they had this relationship. So I've known it for many, many years because I found these manuscripts by Margaret over 25 years ago. Oh, wow. And so I knew, because her sister was a little reluctant to accept it, but her friends all assured me that it was definitely that they were definitely in a love relationship. So I never questioned it, but I did question why Bill didn't get clued in.
I know. And wasn't he kind of having an affair with both of them? I mean, he did have a relationship with Michael too, right?
Earlier on, I can't. Well, I think he did right before Margaret. I do think they probably did early on, but not later on, because I think that Michael was more interested in some other people, and so maybe that's why. But I do know that her friends would tell me, Margaret's friends told me about how he had affairs with different actresses during the relationship, and they would watch Margaret row off to go see Bill, never really knowing what she was going to see when she got there. Would he have somebody else there? And how sad that was, how heartbreaking for them that was to watch her dedicated again to somebody who really didn't deserve her love.
Well, and then especially like her and her sister were close, right?
They were. I think that they once her sister moved away from New York City, they distanced themselves somewhat, and Margaret just got really busy with other things. So there was a distance there for a period of time. But yes, and toward the end of her life, Margaret would go up to the farm in Vermont where her sister lived and visit there very frequently.
So did she ever? Goodnight Moon was written in 47, but published in 49. Was that the deal?
No. I think it's 40. She wrote it in 45. I think. Okay. I'm going to give the wrong dates, I'm sure. And then it took 2 years for them to actually get it published.
I knew there was like this 2-year blip of time.
Right.
So, and she died in 52.
Yes.
So did she ever see any success of that book, or was
not that book? No. In fact, they really were looking at pulling it out. They weren't going to go back to press on it, as far as I know, because the sales were so poor at that time.
Wow.
I know, it's kind of amazing now because it caught on later on. The ones that were most successful were the Important Book. The Golden Books were definitely, that's where she really made a lot of her money. Mm-hmm. And let's see, the Noisy Book series. Those were all her bestsellers. Yeah.
So she did, but it's just interesting. I mean, it's not that I haven't heard of those, but of course, like in this day, like all we know is that, everybody knows that book. I haven't found anybody that hasn't known that book. So,
and I think Runaway Bunny sold pretty well from the beginning, but they put a big push behind that one when they were selling. That was one of the first ones that I could see where they actually really promoted it, came up with a unique campaign, but that was when other publishers were starting to form, and so the competition got more heated, and bookstores started, and department stores started allocating more space to the children's books than they had before. But I was even surprised that my favorite children's book growing up was The Color Kittens, and I had no idea she had written that until I started working with her papers. None.
Aww. I just think that the children's book authors, you don't usually know who they are unless they're already famous from adult books, and then they kind of convert back to children's books. But I'd imagine that they have a lot to be thankful for her, because I think she figured out a lot when it came to just illustrating and putting the words where she put them, and I mean, don't you think that she was?
Oh yes, because she really did craft a lot of how it worked well. What did work and didn't work, she found out pretty quickly. But she also established a lot of sort of terms with publishers that we still respect today. When she first started doing her books, some of her illustrators that she'd hired for a textbook came with her to the children's book publishing side. And she also found a lot of them and a lot of fine artists that she trained to illustrate for children. But she very quickly realized that they could not make a living if they were just going to receive, 52 cents for this illustration and $1 for another one. That was basically how they paid them, just a flat fee. So she actually went to a publisher. She was the first person who went to a publisher and said, this isn't going to work long term, because for me to keep these illustrators on board illustrating our good books, and their success, my success on these books is as important as, or their illustrations are just as important as my words.
Right.
So she actually offered to share her royalties with illustrators and split them in half, because they could not, the publisher wasn't going to come up with an additional royalty. So she split hers, and that is commonplace still today. And she actually even thought through, well, if my book gets turned into if this book gets turned into a song or is read on the radio, I should receive a higher royalty percentage for that, because there's no art that goes along with it. But if he has the art and it's done in a poster or something and they sell that, then he should receive more royalties, which we still respect today. Those are varied depending on who has more work in it.
Yeah, and I loved how when you described how when she was teaching, how she would follow these kids around to listen to how they talked, so that she could get it in her, figure out the words that they were going to find, that the words weren't above or below their age level, which I think it was another important thing, because now we take that as commonplace. You go on Amazon, you put in, I want a book for a 6-year-old, 6-year-old books come up, but back then that was not, nobody knew.
And she actually was very upset with one of her publishers, Bill Scott, because he did an interview with Publishers Weekly after she had left him and had refused to write more books for him. He did an interview with Publishers Weekly and took credit for assigning those lists. And she was like, no, I'm the first person who thought of doing this. I'm the one who did it. So she was very proud that she had come up with these lists that were age appropriate for the kids.
Yeah. And she was so dead on about the illustrators, because another thing is now you take a child into a bookstore and they're not reading the words. What are they doing? They're going to the books that, the colors, the pictures, whatever, and they're saying, I want this book. Where they're not reading the words yet. They're just going for the pictures on the book,
And another thing that Margaret, speaking of walking into a bookstore, one of the things I really think is brilliant that Margaret did is she realized that she had to have different publishers for different dollar values and different styles of books. So she was not going to stay with just one publisher, which was not done. A lot of times they wanted you to have only one publisher. They weren't publishing the style she wanted. She went and found somebody else who did. And you can see how she would take one manuscript, and if one publisher would turn it down, she'd just rework it and send it to another publisher. So,
and don't you think, for especially in that time, and what we're talking about right now in our country about women, and yesterday was Women's Day, and I mean, look what she was doing. When I was just amazed at her education. First of all, her parents educated. Her mom was educated, right?
Yes, she was.
Okay, and then their daughters get educated. I mean, she was more than educated. She worked with men for the most part. She was the woman working with all of these men and kind of telling them what she wanted. And being able, I was like, look at her, at a time when that was not the norm, she went in and she got to say, she had some say as she got more popular and as she started to, make money. And, it's really, she's a woman that you could kind of look at and be like, wow, see what she was able to do.
And she went to Hollins University, which still remains an all-girls school. Now they do co-ed for grad studies. But it is. I think it was very empowering for her to be at that school, because the women were the leaders at the school of different societies and different organizations, and And I think it gave her that ability to step up and take those leadership roles that might not have been available to her if she'd gone to some other school. And I also really have to credit her father in some ways for this, because his family had this respect for women that came from, I think, a great-great-grandmother who had basically raised the children after her husband died, and they considered her to be the brains of the dynasty. And one of my favorite quotes from the family was, every male has a sister of stronger character and greater intellect and is proud of it. So, that was a respected thing for her family.
Yeah.
And he encouraged that in her. He didn't make her be who she wasn't, which is, again, why I think she was able to write the way she did, because she did not have those typical society norms set. So.
Yeah, and she didn't want to disappoint him either.
No.
It seemed like she wanted his approval of what she was doing. And he didn't, it seemed as though he didn't say, like, she got out of college and he said, you better go get married and start having children, which is what other fathers were doing.
Just to get her off of the payroll.
Yeah, just to get her off the payroll.
He did. He sent her, when she decided she wanted to go to UVA for a couple of writing classes, he sent her to UVA. Right. When she wanted to go take a couple of art classes, he let her do that. I mean, he really did support her in what she was trying to do.
Yes.
And that's really how it all came together. I think if she had not had those writing classes at UVA and had not had the art classes, she would not have been able to put picture books together the way that she did, because she could think like an artist, and she could think like a writer, and she could marry the two.
That's right. I forgot about the art school. Yeah, exactly. So that really came in handy for her, in the long run. So
it did. She painted her whole life. I mean, I wouldn't say that she could. She thought she could be a painter if she really wished to. I don't know if that's the case, but it was. But you can tell that she definitely had a style and enjoyed doing it. And there's lots of paintings that she's done around. So.
So how long did this
family happened?
Oh, right. I know this took you a long time. Well, it took you from the time you got your, all her stuff, but how long did it really take you to when you sat down after you gave it to your publisher and they said, go ahead? How long of a process was it for you?
Well, I think that basically it took me a year and a half to do the first version, and then another year to do the second version. So, because I had all that material already gathered. So, and you may have read in the book, my husband died right as I was in the middle of rewriting the book, and so I took a little bit of time off, and they gave me that space, so that was very good. It helped me, but it also helped. I think also having a sudden loss like that gave me a totally different perspective for Pebble, her fiance. She was engaged to be married to a man who's the son of a Carnegie and a Rockefeller. And they have plans to get married in the Bahamas, and she's gone to France for this, music meeting / book tour, and they're going to meet in Panama, and he literally thinks he's sailing to go pick her up at the dock, and instead he gets this telegram saying that she's died of an embolism, and after an appendectomy, and his grief was so great. He said he sat on the boat for a month just crying. And I thought, I get it. I understand, that suddenness and that loss more than I think I would have before, because especially somebody who's so full of life like Margaret was. All of her friends were so shocked at her death, because I think it's just when you have somebody that's bigger than life, you just think they're bigger than death, and they're not.
And she was only 42, and what I found interesting is that she kind of knew, her instincts were like, I need to be getting up. If she would have just gone with her instincts, she probably would not have had a blood clot. For some reason, whatever the European medicine was, or whatever their beliefs were in making her sit still. I mean, we know in this day, you go have an operation, they have you up like probably the same day. If they can get you out of bed the same day, they do,
Right. Exactly. No, you're right. I think it is sort of interesting to see, and to have found those phone calls that she made and the letters, writing saying, I really think I should be moving around, and this doctor's frustrating me. But she was trying to be polite. She was trying to be, the good
Those
patient.
Those must have been chilling to read, though, that she, when you found out that she kind of knew that right there.
That was very shocking. And I think the other thing that was sort of shocking to me is how detailed the American consulate was describing her death.
Yeah.
And because then they had the nurse give a statement, and then it was really very interesting. They don't do that. I mean, maybe they do today, but it was, every detail of how of that morning that she died, the nurse wrote down. And yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, that was crazy, and well, of course, we now can look back and say, okay, well, we know why she was here and why she was only here for a little bit of time. She contributed so much, but, 42 is just, doesn't seem old enough. So.
No. And I do think that, with it being so sudden, it was interesting to see how Pebble, her fiance, has kept the house that she had in Maine, where her writing studio. You literally can sit at her desk, and her ruby red kerosene lamp is right there, and her pencils are there, her pen with a feather. Really, it almost feels like you're just sort of sitting in her house for that moment, and she's going to walk up behind you. It was a neat thing. So.
Yeah, that's great. So did he live there then after she died?
It was she had a house that she built for Michael just a little bit over, and they really lived there. The only house had a door open to nowhere, and he had young children at that time, so it was not safe. So they lived there for a little bit of time. Now they
like you needed a little gate there.
Yeah, something. But the stairs are rickety and old, and I think that it just made more sense to be in a little bit sturdier house.
Can people see? Is it a tourist site?
No, it's not. It's part of, I think it is now part of the Vinyl Haven Land Trust, and they do a yearly Margaret Wise Brown celebration, and they do take tours at that time. And it's led by a man who knows a lot about not only Margaret, but the island and the history of the island. So it's a good thing to do, and I think it's in like June or July every year. But if they look at the Vinyl Haven Land Trust, they'll talk about it if anybody's interested in seeing it. But it's not some place people can just pull up and see, because it is private, a private home.
It is private, yeah. So now, so now you've done all of this. Now what? What are you? I saw that you have a Civil War book, so that was published before, though, right?
Right, and I actually have done a few Civil War books for different companies. That has always been an interest. I was born my mother was a Northerner, my father was a Southerner, and so in college I read diaries from both women on both sides of the conflict, and that was always fascinating to me to see how both felt they were in the right, and to see their perspectives. So I've always been fascinated by that, and actually my next book the next biography I'm working on is a biography on the Civil War illustrator who was effectively the Forrest Gump of the Civil War. He just happened to be at every major conflict, and his illustrations are so telling, and his letters are so beautiful. To be able to write in that same style, you have to have a lot of material. You have to have somebody who's written a lot of letters, so that you can really put yourself in that place, and you have to have sort of history being documented at the same time, which of course the Civil War is heavily documented. So I would be able to do the same thing with his life. But he was a very interesting fellow, Charles Wellington Reed.
It's really interesting because at the beginning of the week I did an interview with William Davis, and he's a professor at Virginia Tech.
Oh yes, my daughter's at Virginia Tech.
Okay, so. And he wrote a 900-page book on Jefferson Davis. And
Wow.
I read it, and I interviewed him, but he was so cool. Like he knew his stuff, inside out. He was a Civil War professor, so it was really cool to talk to him, and I learned so much about it. So when I saw that about you, I was like, oh my gosh, that seems to be my theme this week. So
it is a moment in our history that is unfortunately still alive in a lot of the way we live, and the way the fabric of our communities is structured, and we're not really past it all yet, which is amazing.
I know, exactly, and I tell my children that are studying it in history, when they say, why does it matter? I'm like, look around, it still matters. If you want to know why it's like it is, you have to go back and you have to see what happened,
It does. It's, in fact, I have a lake house in Alabama, and I still drive by rebel flags, which completely blows my mind. I can't understand that that's still a thing, but they do. People
Take care.
You can still carry it on.
Absolutely. So. Well, I really hope I'll get to know when this comes out. If you would tell me, I would love to have you on to talk about it. It would be so much fun.
He's again, a fascinating individual who really risked his life to save people. He's a fascinating man. So.
Yeah, and you write great biographies, so I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
This one is this is amazing. And everybody go and get this book. I'm sure the reception you've received on it is amazing too.
I thought that the biggest thing was going to be her bedroom was painted green. Oh my gosh, it was I've been very pleased. I cannot believe the number of reviews and attention it's received. I'm very, very grateful.
Well, it's beautiful. That's why too. It was beautifully written. So thank you so much, Amy. I can't wait to talk to you again.
What a treat. This was so much fun. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck with your new book.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.